Hi, it's Hannah from Stitching Kitchen. I'm going to be talking about the PFAFF Admire 7000. It is kind of their top of the range overlock, a Coverstitch stitch machine. It is a fabulous thing. It is fully automated, all automatic tensions and everything, and it's air threading. So it's one of those machines that it does everything: overlock, cover stitch, chain stitch, which means that you only need to have one machine in your sewing room. And it does a wonderful thing, which is a chain stitch and a 4-thread overlock stitch at the same time. What I'm going to show you today, though, is how to change and set up the machine if you've been using it for overlock and you then want to come on and do cover stitch. Okay, so the machine is set up for the 5-thread safety stitch in the wide position. So the needles are currently in positions A and D. So when we're moving across to cover stitch, there is a few things that we need to do. And the first one that I'm going to do with you today is to move the needles over. So important when you're changing needles on an overlocker or a cover stitch, just want to make sure that there is some sort of safety mechanism so that we haven't got the needles dropping down into the mechanism. You can use a piece of cloth, a piece of paper. In this case, I've just found a plastic bag in my little box of tricks that comes with the machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to move the needle from position A over into position C, because I'm going to do a narrow cover stitch. To make my life easy, I tend to use let me just drop the door down because then I've got a little bit more space. I use the needle threader, which has got a needle holder on the end. It just means that you've then kind of got another pair of hands. So slide that up. We're going to loosen the grub screw for A to release the needle. And then that should then drop down. And this is where having it in the holder means it's less likely to drop into the mechanism anyway. Before I do anything else, I'm going to tighten that grub screw. There is nothing worse than losing one of these little grub screws. You need to replace it. So just make sure that any that are empty have been tightened up again. And when we're saying about tightening these things, we're tightening them finger tight. We're not getting the world's strongest person to do them, because if you over tighten, you can damage the mechanism and damage the screw. Push your needle into the position you want. So in this case, I've loosened off C, push the needle right up. On these front needle positions, you can actually see the top of the needle hit the needle stop. Give that a tighten up, and then I can just remove that. So we're now set up, the needles are now set up, ready to do the narrow cover stitch. So if I was to select that from the menu, which is probably the last one, nearly, there we go. You can see that that's where we need those needles. The next elements that we need to do when we're changing the settings on the machine from overlock to cover stitch is we need to make sure that we can remove the things that are going to come across here. We are going to put a different plate in here, which means that everything needs to be level. And obviously with cover stitch, we're not doing an upper looper. So this little fella needs to come down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this into position B. It won't go across just yet because this is still too high. So if we turn the hand wheel, always turn that towards yourself until it's in the lowest position. You will then be able to lock that into B. So now when we continue to turn that, the upper looper no longer moves, so it stays down. So make sure that's in position B. We're also going to disengage the cutting blade. And on this machine, there's a little knob here. We pull it out and we turn that towards ourselves and it locks back in. So that's out of the way. And then we're also going to make sure that our stitch finger is removed. So we take that back into the rolled hem position or the R position, because we don't need a stitch finger for the cover stitch. The lovely thing about the Admire 7000 is that all of the information that you need for setting up each stitch is in the computer on board. So the cover stitch overview shows you where the needles go, what the width is, and everything like that. So you've got the basics here, but if you need a reminder on the other settings, if you press information, this screen tells you which threads you're going to need. So 2 needles and the lower looper going through from the purple port. If we press on number 1, the information, it tells that you need to replace this for the B part, we're going to drop the knife. We're going to have it in rolled hem mode, normal amount of pressure on the presser foot, and that we, as we just did, drop the upper looper down and lock it into place. And this screen here will tell you why you would use this stitch. I like to use a narrow 2 needle cover stitch for doing my hems on my knit makes. So the very last thing that we need to do is to exchange this area here for this one. So this is the front of the machine that you use when you're using a overlock, and we just need to change that to the cover stitch one so that then our fabric can lay flat. So how you do this is you press down on here where it says A, and that releases this part, and then we then put this part in. So we just make sure that it's kind of lined up and click it into place, and then you are ready to thread up and go. And here I am just sewing a scrap just to make sure that it's working, and there we have our 2 thread narrow cover stitch.